Hello everyone, and welcome to Lunch Bunch number 8. Today we will be talking about Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. In case you're new and have never watched Lunch Bunch before, my name is Bill, and I'll be leading our little chat today. For my lunch today, I have a banana bread muffin that you can sort of see a little bit. I'm trying not to drop it, which is a challenge for me, let's be real. So as I said, today we're talking about Little Leaders by Vashti Harrison. Oh, and here. Ta-da! You can see Vashti's gorgeous artwork on the cover. Oh, it's so pretty. And basically, Little Leaders, first, let's start with how this works. I'll go through and just give a brief overview of what the book is about. And then I'll count down my top 3 favorite things about this book. Please feel free to chime in at any time if you have other favorite things as well that you've enjoyed, or if you have questions or anything. After I've gone through my favorite things, usually that's sort of setting aside more time for questions if you have them, but at any point in time, drop in with questions. And then after that, I'll give some recommendations for other books that you might like. Without further ado, let's dive into Little Leaders. So basically what this book is sort of a survey, as the title says, of bold women in Black history. And it really has a very broad scope to it. It covers everyone all the way starting with Phyllis Wheatley to Dominique Dawes. I was very happy personally to see Dominique Dawes there, as I enjoy gymnastics very much. And so it goes through, and each woman is given a page that has an overview of her life, her accomplishments, her interests, and then Vashti has done a gorgeous illustration that features a little bit of what these women did during their lives, a little bit of like hallmarks of the time period that they lived in, and it goes through and covers all the way up until people who are still alive today. So it gives, as I said, a pretty broad scope. Now, for my favorite things about this book, I would say number 1, that we'll start things off with, is just the sheer variety of professions that the Little Leaders did. You would expect to find doctors, lawyers, politicians in a book focusing on history and achievements and everything. But you get everything from a social psychologist, Mamie Phipps Clarke, to Marian Anderson, who is a very famous opera singer, Katherine Johnson, a NASA mathematician who's featured in the movie Hidden Figures, who skipped 7 grades. That's incredible. I'll touch on this a little bit later, but... Oh, and Raven Wilkinson, a ballerina. So just in that scope, you have a social psychologist, an opera singer, a NASA mathematician, and a ballerina. In addition to also having doctors, lawyers, activists, politicians. And I think that's really... In Vashti's introduction, she talks about wanting young Black women and girls to be able to sort of see themselves as anything and see those possibilities for themselves. And that is so powerful. And one of the ways that Vashti really, I think, accomplishes that in such a beautiful way is by including all of these varieties. So if you are a young Black girl reading this book, you see a ballerina, an opera singer, an activist, a politician, a lawyer, a doctor. And many of these people were the first people to be doing these things. And I think that's just It's remarkable and inspiring. And you also learn just all sorts of fun facts about all of these variety of professions. I didn't know Maya Angelou made movies. I now want to go out and watch her movies as well. I only knew her writing. So many women who have done such incredible things in such a massive variety of fields. It's remarkable. And thank you to Vashti for putting them all in one book. It was such a nice sort of like, teaser, and now I want to go out and learn more about all of them. And so my second favorite thing, I've said Vashti's name many, many times now. Her artwork cannot be undersold here. It is the true star of this book. The way that she captures the spirit of each of the little leaders is so beautiful. And she specifically said that she wanted to sort of present them all within the same framework, so that little girls can all see themselves on that canvas, which I think is incredible. And so each of the little leaders have their eyes closed, and it's so peaceful and beautiful. And I think of all the fun little details. I love Zora Neale Hurston has a great hat. Love getting to see Mae Jemison in her spacesuit. And I think just all the little details that Vashti incorporates that make these women really come alive using like a relatively minimalistic style. You don't get every detail of each leader's life, but there's enough in each image to see them for who they were or are, because many of them are still living. And I think I'll talk a little bit more about this, but Vashti did another book, Little Legends, which is exceptional men in Black history. And for that book, we made little cute magnets for people who pre-ordered the book. And I was so happy to have my little Mae Jemison magnet because I just adore the way that Vashti drew her. I think it's so beautiful. So I guess my final favorite thing about this book is just the rich sense of history that you get from sort of reading this book start to finish. Obviously, you can go through this book and look at the table of contents and see, oh, I want to learn about Oprah, or I want to learn about Zora Neale Hurston, and just go right to their entry. But reading the book start to finish, what really struck me is just the through line that you have from Phyllis Wheatley to Zora Neale Hurston to Maya Angelou, and just that rich line of culture that's drawn there, and the way that each of those women I just mentioned were writers, but they were writers within their specific moment in history, but also connected to one another. I think that's really powerful to see the scope of that, and you see even a through line from Ida B. Wells to Angela Davis. And these amazing Black women were out there, each doing their own thing in their own time period, but they're all connected to one another through this larger sense of history. And the book does such a great job of giving you an overview of that. And also at the end, which I was very happy to see this, Vashti provides additional resources for things that you may be more interested in learning about, like a list of movies, a list of books to read. And I think that's really important because as I said earlier, my main takeaway from reading this book and the thing that I was most excited about was now I want to go out and learn more about these women. I read about Mamie Phipps Clarke, whose name I mentioned earlier, the social psychologist, and she studied what was known as the doll test, in which children expressed an unconscious bias towards white dolls. And that very clinical study was used as evidence in the Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education. And of course, I learned about Brown versus Board of Education in school, as I think many people did, but I didn't learn about Mamie Phipps Clarke. And I think it's really refreshing to learn about sort of the people behind history and be reminded that everyday people have been out there making change through their passion. for forever. And I think that's especially important for young Black people to be reminded of, that people like them have been out there changing history, but also making beautiful art for so long. I love that there are so many sort of filmmakers, actors, actresses, singers, Nina Simone, included in this book. So that sort of rounds out my top 3 favorite things: the variety of professions, Vashti's stunning artwork, and sort of the rich sense of like a timeline of history that you get from the book. And unless anyone has any questions or well, presumably you would be asking the questions and I would be providing the answers. But unless anyone has any questions, I guess I'll just go on to sort of my recommendations for other books you might enjoy if you liked Little Leaders. So first off, if you liked Little Leaders, I just realized I haven't taken a single bite of my muffin. Oh well, I will have to do that later. I got so caught up talking about Vashti's book. Whoops. But number 1 is obviously, if you liked this book of Vashti's, you should read her other books. You should read Little Dreamers, which talks about women all around the world. And you should read Little Legends, which focuses on Black men. Both books do a great job. And it's one of the things I love about Little Dreamers as well, is you don't just get a list of people whose names you may already know. There are plenty of those sort of somewhat under the radar people you may never have heard of, in addition to the big names. And I love that there's that variety there, because I felt like I was always learning something. And I loved to sort of see at the end of the books, there's like additional people that get mentioned. And I think that's really lovely. And I love that there's like, Vashti mentions at the end of Little Dreamers, like, without Zora Neale Hurston, would we have Alice Walker? And just, again, that through line from people, from one person to another, and one artist to another is really remarkable. So definitely check out Vashti's other books. They're also available as smaller board books. I think they make really great baby gifts. And they have all of Vashti's artwork with just a little bit more condensed information. And then I would also, if you are somewhat an older reader, or even just a parent looking to find books to read and talk about race and Black history with your children, I highly recommend Stamped by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. It does a phenomenal job of breaking down concepts for young readers, and really dives into parts of history that I know I didn't learn about in school, and I really think it should be required reading. I also highly recommend everything that Jewel Parker Rhodes has ever written. I have a hard time thinking of an author who I love more than her. But specifically, I would say Ghost Boys and Black Brother do a really great job. I mentioned the sense, I keep coming back to this, the sense of history that Little Dreamers has. And I think Black Brother and Ghost Boys both do a phenomenal job of showing how the past and the present are still so connected. In Black Brother, there's talk about the Black Count, and it talks about sort of like the stories that don't necessarily get told in history, and how not hearing those stories can sort of diminish your sense of what you're capable of. And so I think it's important to tell those stories, to have those stories out there. So I highly recommend those. I also recommend How High the Moon by Karen Parsons. Just a really wonderful work of historical fiction with beautiful writing. And unless anyone has any questions or comments, that is all for today. Thank you for joining me and having lunch. And it was a pleasure to talk about Vashti's wonderful book, Little Dreamers, Bold Women in Black History. And until next time, 2 weeks from now, when we will be talking about Mr. Popper's Penguins, stay safe and stay well, everyone.